everybody. It's Dr. Betsy, your host of the Health Explained Show, brought to you in part by House Call VR. But today I'm so excited because we're going to be talking to Julie Michelson, and we're all talk about autoimmunity. And this is a big topic because there's a lot of people in the world that are suffering with these kind of conditions. So thank you, Julie, for being with us today.
It is absolutely my pleasure.
How did you get into this as a field?
So I got into this, like so many, through my own health journey. I had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in my early 30s and was told I couldn't heal and that nothing I did other than taking medication would help me slow down my decline. And I believed them, and I did that for 11 years, and I did not slow down my decline. And I ended up on 10 prescriptions, most of which were for side effects of the other prescriptions. And I was still in my 40s, was at the point where they wanted me to get a handicap placard on my car. I wasn't able to work. I was resting while my kids were at school so that I could handle morning and then afternoon, evening. And that was all the energy I had. And luckily, I had a wake-up call. I realized that my kids were afraid I wouldn't live to see 50. I was afraid I wouldn't live to see 50. And it was in a conversation I had with my youngest that I realized I thought I had been trying everything because I tried every prescription they gave me. And when I couldn't promise her I wouldn't die, what I did promise her was I would try everything. And something, thank God, shifted in that moment. And I started to try lifestyle approaches, and they worked. It took a long time. I say I had the throw spaghetti at the wall approach to healing. I had no idea what I was doing, hadn't heard of functional medicine, certainly hadn't heard of anything like a health coach, and just really grateful. Obviously, this is what I am supposed to be here to do. I'm in my mid-50s now, and so much more active and vibrant. And I could never imagine that I could feel this well.
I think this is so important because I think there's a lot of us out there that have been in a situation where we get a diagnosis like that. And in traditional medicine, there's not a lot of answers, because, and it's not the fault of traditional medicine, it's just the way it developed. And it was, medications are the answer. And like you said, you get one medication, you get a side effect. So they give you another one to combat that side effect. It's interesting enough, when I was like 18 or 19, I started having a lot of health problems. And I remember being in the doctor's office and they're like, we think you have lupus, and that's an autoimmune disease. And, 51 years later now, like that it never happened, but
Right.
like for the longest time. And now looking back, I realized, well, I was not like living a healthy lifestyle. I was eating crappy food and,
But
not
we
taking
didn't
care of my
know.
body. And yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you explain like autoimmunity to people? Like if, even people who have that diagnosis don't necessarily even understand what that means.
Yeah. I look at it as autoimmune issues, like so many things that are on the rise right now, are directly related to chronic inflammation. And inflammation, we hear the word inflammation and we think, oh, that's negative. And inflammation is actually a positive response our body has to heal. And I think of inflammation as a spectrum of, all of the things that we think of as aging related that we discount, right? Like we don't want to be whiners and we're told you're supposed to decline. So, when you're waking up with aches and pains, or you're not sleeping well, or your brain you have a little brain fog, or maybe a lot of brain fog, all of those are signs of chronic inflammation. And if we're smart enough to listen to the whispers and find those underlying causes of, hey, just ask. It's, thank our bodies instead of like, I'm hurting again. It's like, no, your body's trying to tell you something. If you ignore it, it will get louder and louder. And so that other end of the spectrum is autoimmunity. That is alarm sirens blaring. And at that point, by the time you have a diagnosis, and I love it when you can have the symptoms and not have a diagnosis. It can take up to an average of 8 years to get diagnosed with autoimmunity, because often labs will look really pretty, and Western medicine doesn't necessarily look under the same rocks or look as deep as functional medicine does. So it can get missed for a long time. But that is, by that time, I kind of think of very simple non-medical terms of what it felt like, and what's really going on. And at that point, your body has been trying to fight things for so long. Your immune system, I think of as like a little army. And if you don't give your troops a rest, they're just not precise. And
Mhm.
that's what happens with autoimmunity. And we could do deep dive into gut health and triggering and molecular mimicry, but I just like people to understand that there's not an innate problem in your body. I don't care if you have 20 relatives with autoimmunity. That doesn't mean you have to experience that and that you can't improve your symptoms. And so it's just finding out what is driving that inflammation that will start to allow your body to heal, and your symptoms will ease, if not disappear.
Yeah, I think that's so important because often when somebody gets a diagnosis, it's almost like a death sentence in a way, meaning like,
Absolutely.
that's me and that's me all the time forever and ever and ever, and this is my diet, and then they almost start to identify with that diagnosis too, to a point. But
That's
what I'm hearing you saying is that that's not, it doesn't
They don't
have to
have
be
to.
that way.
No, and it's a common, almost all of us, I went through the same thing. I mean, I was inseparable from my identity of somebody who had RA, and my expectation was to decline. So I did, right? Like it was, and no, I'm not saying it's all in your head, but your thoughts have such impact on what your body does. And so that's one of the things I do with my clients in the beginning, is we start to unravel and separate that identity. It's just a label. And that's why I say I'm glad when someone doesn't have a diagnosis. And often once they have one and they haven't taken steps
Mm.
to change lifestyle, they'll end up with 3, 4, 5, not uncommon at all. And it's not because their body has lost capability. It's just, if you don't, it's like, think of, if you're constantly picking a scab, it's never going to heal. And you're going to create, then you're going to get an infection. You're going to create a bigger problem.
And I think that's like important too. I love this idea that really the root cause is inflammation, but then we got to figure out what's causing inflammation. But it's like it's the same process. That's why autoimmunity can kind of fit under this all same umbrella, because it's an inflammatory process. But somebody, it may be showing up for you like rheumatoid arthritis. For
Right.
me, I was getting fibromyalgia.
Oh,
Some
have
people
that too.
might some people might have the thyroid problem. Some people may develop like Crohn's disease, or
Or you
it,
mentioned lupus. I mean,
yeah.
it really, the approach to healing and those drivers are all the same. We love to say in functional medicine, and I like saying this especially again to those people that have that genetic tendency for
Mm,
autoimmunity, is that, genetics may load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. And you can have, there are plenty, you can have, they do twin studies, identical twins, same genetics. One ends up with expressed autoimmunity and one just has the genetic markers. Doesn't matter. And so let's find those triggers. And the body is miraculous. It really, really is.
And I know people who are listening that may be in this boat right now with an autoimmune diagnosis, or I'm sure if you don't have one, you know somebody that has one.
Yes.
Where should they start to look for help?
I think, again, finding some kind of functional medicine or integrative practitioner, but there's so many things we can start to do on our own. And then, if you're under the care of a rheumatologist, share what you're doing, because often as we heal, if you're on medication, you'll need less and less, or they'll start pulling you off. And I love to say, don't take yourself off your medication. I didn't take myself off my medication. My doctors took the medication away as I healed. And I think the low hanging fruit that everybody can start to do on their own is diet. Diet is such a
Mm.
tremendous trigger for inflammation, autoimmunity, the whole thing, and really all chronic illness. That's definitely the easiest place to start, where we can start on our own.
And why is it that diet is such a important factor in this?
So I mentioned before the gut health issue. Unfortunately, for the most part, especially if you're in the States, but it's gotten, I think, more and more so around the world now. Most people aren't eating real food. We are so inundated with processed foods. I have a hard time separating when I talk about another driver is toxins, and to me, processed foods and like they're the same. You can't separate them out, because your body doesn't recognize processed food as food. And so right away, when you're eating something that's especially ultra processed, sugars, artificial sweeteners, bad fats, all the chemicals, all the additives, you are creating an immune response, because there's something foreign that your body needs to manage. And so simply that alone, without all the other stuff, if you're, decades in to eating a lot of processed foods, like so many of us did when we thought the healthy stuff was dangerous, and so there were all these other alternatives, that alone is enough to wear down that. And then we could get into the gut health, that it also causes an imbalance, a dysbiosis in the gut. It can cause leaky gut, which really directly leads to autoimmunity. Leaky gut allows those bigger food particles to get into your system that shouldn't, triggering an autoimmune response, or an immune response that can then trip into an autoimmune response. So and we all eat every day, hopefully, unless you're intentionally doing a fast. But so that's why I think it's such an essential place to start, and a place where we can, if you just focused on real food, I'm not saying it would solve all your problems, but and sometimes work your way toward real food. It's a huge impact. We need those nutrients too to heal.
It's interesting. I always tell people, like, your criteria of what to pick to eat is it either walks, flies, swims, or grows.
Yes.
If it's those four, they can eat that, because like Twinkies don't grow on trees.
No, it's so funny. Why do we always go to Twinkies? Me too.
I know.
We
Poor
don't,
Twinkies.
and if you're opening a package, I won't say never ever, I went through a phase where I didn't eat anything ever out of a package. And there are some minimally processed healthy foods too. But if you're opening a package of any sort, there's your opportunity to flip it around and read the ingredients. And if it's, got the three things you were expecting in there and nothing else, perfect, go for it. Because it's really close to having grown or flown or walked or swam.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So in wrapping up here, is there anything about autoimmunity that I didn't ask you about? That you want us to know about? Well, I know we could actually talk for I know we could talk for hours. But
I think the most important thing for people to take away is that autoimmunity can heal, because I really think that still people are getting diagnosed today and told that they can't. And so that's the conversation I want us to keep having, is autoimmunity can heal, and you are not your diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I was just thinking about with this functional testing in the gut too, and I just recently did my food sensitivity testing.
Huge.
And I think it's important with some of these tests that you work with somebody that knows how to interpret them. Where I know there are some companies where you can order them on your own, but like, for example, an error that might happen if you order them on their own is I got my food sensitivity testing back, and it came back and it's all the foods that I'm eating right now. And I'm going, oh my God, I'm sensitive to egg whites. I'm sensitive to kale. Like, this is everything I'm eating. And then I had to stop myself and go, yeah, that's because I'm developing antibodies against those foods, because there's an underlying leaky gut. And these are the particles that are getting into my system. Yeah. Because I'm not eating, I forgot, like, I'm trying to think of something that I wasn't having a sensitivity to, but whatever I wasn't having a sensitivity, those aren't the things I'm eating. So of course I'm not developing antibodies to fight those things off.
And I'm glad you said that. And not all tests are created equal either.
That's
So
good.
we had started a second business to give people direct access to functional medicine lab testing. And they can't, some people they've done deep dives and they just want the test and they don't want anything else. But all the tests are different. And so, it's good to talk to somebody like Dr. Betsy or me or a provider that can guide you. I had the same experience a few years ago. I had done a test and it was like, oh, there's Wednesday night dinner. It was salmon and broccoli and garlic.
And before I got really into functional medicine and didn't know like everything that I know now, I remember I was searching, like I deal with a lot of women who have interstitial cystitis, which is an autoimmune condition of the bladder. And I remember there's not a lot of information on that condition. And I was searching and I did some testing and I was like, let's look at food sensitivity. And I got this test back and this woman was allergic to eggs. And she had just like was so proud of her chickens. She had this beautiful chicken coop. And then I had to tell her, oh, you're allergic to eggs without knowing the whole thing about leaky gut.
Right.
And I feel guilty to this day because she got rid of all her chickens.
Oh no.
And I was like, well, you don't need to get rid of the chickens, just don't eat the eggs. But like she was like, nope, we're getting rid of the chickens. So I'm like, now knowing back, I'm like, I hope she ended up finding a functional medicine doctor because it was at a practice that I don't even have access to the records anymore. So maybe if you're listening, I'm sorry if you got rid of your chickens that you didn't need to. It was probably a leaky gut issue.
I love that you brought that up because most providers are doing the best that they know. And that's where, for something like autoimmunity or any chronic illness, that's where Western medicine, it was never designed to handle chronic illness. It's amazing for acute care. Like you better believe if I need surgery, I'm calling a Western trained doc for sure. So I like to remind people because especially those of us that have then shifted to take matters into our own hands and did heal, that our doctors do the best. They use the tools they have in their tool belt. And that's what's so amazing about functional medicine is it gives you a way bigger tool belt. So
yeah. I love that.
That you shared that.
Where can people find out more information about you?
The easiest place is jm.coach. And from there, you can get to my website, to either one of my businesses, social, my podcast, all the things.
Awesome. Everybody go make sure you check out all Julie's sites. And when you're done, don't forget to come back to wytv7.org and you check out all the amazing other shows that we have on the channel. Don't forget to hit the donate button. Even I know that sometimes I've not donated in my life because I'm like, oh, I just don't have enough money to give. But honestly, just $1 can make a difference. If everybody just gave $1, because all your money is going into community events, it's going into scholarships, and it's going into the production of these amazing shows that they're bringing to you with all this wonderful information. So make sure you go check that out. Follow me on social media. And lastly, don't forget to tune in again for another episode of the Health Explained show. Once again, thank you, Julie, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.